Welcome to the program. I'm Jeff Schechtman. Woody Allen once said that the world was divided into two groups, the horrible and the miserable. Let's play a quick clip.
I have a very pessimistic view of life. You should know this about me if we're going to go out. You know, I feel that life is divided up into the horrible and the miserable. Those are the two categories, you know. The horrible would be like, I don't know, terminal cases, you know, and blind people, cripples. I don't know how they get through life. It's amazing to me, you know. And the miserable is everyone else. So when you go through life, you should be thankful that you're miserable, because you're very lucky to be miserable.
To answer Woody Allen's existential question of how people in this horrible category get through life, the answer is usually hope. But the form that hope takes can vary widely. Sometimes it grows out of faith, sometimes out of denial, and sometimes out of science. This is often true, be it real cutting-edge science or the placebo that is most Western medicine. My guest, author and journalist Richard Cohen, has lived with conditions that Woody Allen would call horrible. Yet through his writing and his voice, he has not only defined his hope, he has given it to others. And so it is once again in his new book, Chasing Hope. Richard Cohen is the author of 2 New York Times bestsellers, Blindsided, detailing his struggle with MS and cancer, and Strong at the Broken Places, which follows the lives of 5 individuals living with serious chronic illness. His new book is Chasing Hope, a patient's deep dive into stem cells, faith, and the future. It is my pleasure to welcome Richard Cohen back to this program. Richard, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
It's great to have you here. One of the things that you really point out is kind of the difference in hope between things that really are, and we'll talk more about this, kind of cutting-edge science, cutting-edge medical developments like stem cell research, which is really at the heart of what you talk about, and kind of the hope, the placebo of hope that is part of kind of traditional Western medicine. Talk a little about that first.
Well, I knew absolutely nothing about stem cells, about that area of medicine. You know, I had it in the back of my mind that it was sort of futuristic, that it was somewhere down the road, and maybe someday, maybe not even in my lifetime, you know, it would become a part of treatment. And in 2013, my wife and I went to the Vatican. We were invited to participate in a stem cell conference. The Vatican, of course, is opposed to embryonic stem cells, but most stem cells today in the world of medical research are adult cells, and the movement is toward using your own cells, what they call autologous cells. And when you use your own cells, it's preferable just because it minimizes the risks. So that's why the Vatican had the conference, to get out from under that controversy. So here we are at the Vatican. I chaired the opening panel, which was on autoimmune diseases. I knew very little about the subject, but I knew a lot about the illnesses and the experience of being sick. And scientists and opinion leaders from all over the world were there, people of all races, religions, and they shared a lot of knowledge. And what I learned gave me literally the first pangs of hope I had known as an adult, when I realized that this was something not just other people were doing, but maybe I could somehow get into it. And, you know, there was a lot of time spent with people talking in small groups, and every part of me wanted to go up to everybody I met and say, "Excuse me, would you treat me?" And of course, it doesn't exactly work that way. But I was lucky enough to run into another participant who was a neurologist who I sort of just vaguely knew, but from New York. And I told him I was very interested in cell therapy, and he said, "Come and see me when we get back to New York." And I'm telling you, 48 hours later, I was sitting in his office in Midtown, and I decided to become his patient, and the FDA approved a clinical trial, And I was the first person literally in the world to be treated with this particular kind of stem cell. So, Lord, you just talk about hope. You just never know where it's going to take you.
How was that hope different from the kind that you had heard from doctors before about your MS and about other diseases? When doctors sometimes tend to be hopeful, how was this different?
You know, I've heard doctors talk so much about hope. I want to check my back pocket to see if my wallet's still there. That's not fair because it's well intentioned, but it was hollow. I decided that hope was something that clergymen and doctors talked about when they had nothing better to offer. But this was real. In my mind, this was people taking action. This was people taking chances. This was people trying to take control, and all of those had tremendous appeal to me. And when I agreed to be the first one in the world to be treated with this particular stem cell, a number of people asked me if I had any qualms about doing it, and I immediately said no, none. You can't be risk averse. It's an honor. It's an opportunity. It's an honor to do something, to be able to do something that might help future generations, and I never had a second thought about it.
How much did you feel you had to get up to speed or know about the science behind this, and how much of it was an element of trust in this doctor?
Well, it was both. I mean, it's a long process because, they harvest. This sounds pretty horrible, but it's not. They dig deep into your chest, your sternum, and take out bone marrow, aspirate it out, because that's where these particular stem cells reside. And it looks like a horrible process, but and then you wait 3 or 4 months because it's in a lab, it's being treated. I mean, it's refrigerated. You go into very temperature regulated areas. You have to be sterile. I was allowed back there with the proper dress because I was writing about this in my blog. And by the time I actually, this went on for 6 months before I was actually treated. And, I went in there not with any particular expectations, but very hopeful that something was going to change.
Mm-hmm. At what point did you think that this really might make a difference once the treatment started?
Well, I had a little bit of bad luck because 1 month after the treatment started, I had a life-threatening blood clot in my lungs, a pulmonary embolism that kills a lot of people. And when I got to the ICU unit and I told the doctors about the sensations that I had and the fact that I almost, couldn't even walk, 9 weeks earlier, they said that they were surprised I was still alive, and that set me back quite a bit. And so the neurologist thinks that that my body took such a beating from the pulmonary embolism that it blunted a lot of the possibilities for the stem cells, which is why I'm going to go and the FDA has approved a second phase, and I'm going to take part in that and just see if it does anything.
What impact did all of this have, and you talk a bit about this, what impact did all this have on what had been the traditional treatments that you had been going through?
Well, it didn't really have much of an impact on the treatments themselves. The fact is, by coincidence, I had just, maybe 3 weeks or so before the idea of going into this conference came up, I'd gone to one of my neurologists and said, you know what, I'm not doing it anymore. The traditional treatments just don't do anything for me. I tried everything. I was even on really vicious chemotherapy for the better part of a year. I lost my hair, made me sick. I tried everything, and nothing really worked. And but I put the cell therapy into a totally separate category, and even in the wake of all the disasters, I was hopeful, and boy, was that a new sensation for me.
Talk about that, how it was new and how it impacted your quality of life because you had this hopefulness.
It was very hard to explain. It is hard to explain, but it was hard for me to understand because it was like, it really was something I had never, it was like a new sensation. I mean, I felt upbeat. I felt unburdened. I felt that I was open to possibility. I did not fall into the trap of playing the expectation game. I mean, people who do that are very often sorely disappointed and often hurt by it because if you have specific expectations, if I thought that I was going to regain all of the vision that I lost, that I was going to be able to drive a car again or play tennis again or hike up a mountain again, I would have been very disappointed because none of those things happened. My progress, I mean, some people got out of wheelchairs in this trial. I think because of these other issues I talked about, my results were not nearly as dramatic, but I did have some positive results. But I've never regretted doing it, and I will do it again if I can.
Mm-hmm. Were you surprised that you didn't have any regrets about it, that you felt really secure in taking this risk?
No, I really wasn't surprised. I mean, I didn't see it as particularly risky. I mean, my neurologist kept sitting me down and going over the risks again and again with me, and getting me to really think about it and make sure that I was comfortable with it, because I don't think he wanted me to have any regrets. And it was easy. It was I was so upbeat going into this thing, and again, without any particular specific expectations, but just the idea of improving my life was very exciting to me.
Mm-hmm. There's also this element, and you touched on it a bit before, of kind of the whole mind-body connection, that having hope and feeling that hope for the first time is almost a part of the improvement. It's part of the process itself in some ways, whether it is technically or not.
Oh, that's very true. I mean, a couple of medical schools, including Harvard Medical School, have done studies that show that people who have hope or faith, either one, they did it with both, have find better results from their treatments. And a lot of, and any doctor will tell you, any good doctor will tell you that the more hopeful and confident a patient is, the better his or her chances of recovery are. I think it's very well understood that attitude plays a tremendous role in the healing process.
Talk a little bit about what you see as the difference between hope and faith.
Well, I'm not a person of faith, and yet I'm a person of hope. Some religions tie the two together and believe that without faith there can be no hope. One clergyman, let's not talk about specific religions, but one clergyman said to me when I was writing the book that hope without faith is an empty hope. And I thought to myself, no, that can't be true. That's just not true. But for people who really are serious religious people, I think they do believe that. There's nothing wrong with it. It just doesn't apply to everybody. I think hope and faith are very different. I think that you can have hope if you've got the right. It's almost like it's in your DNA. That it just comes naturally. It just, as I said before, it's just organic. It just grows by itself, and it just doesn't require faith. If you don't believe in organized religion, as I don't, it doesn't mean in any way that you can't know hope.
Did you find any pushback along the way from traditional doctors or from anybody else that really pushed back against either you doing this or was more skeptical about it?
There was a bit of skepticism, but nobody pushed back. I mean, I think everybody in medicine recognizes the possibilities. There are some people in medicine who think this is the future, and others who think this is a positive thing. I've never heard anybody say anything negative about it. I just think that there's a wide range of views on how effective and important it is or is going to be. And but when you read accounts of people, they're growing organs in laboratories that come from stem cells. Because stem cells are blank cells, meaning they can morph into anything, wherever they need it. And people are in laboratories are making body parts out of stem cells. And I just don't see how anybody can deny the potential. We're not there yet. We're in historic terms, we're remarkably close to the starting line. This is a relatively new technology, and I'm not going to live long enough to see it work to its full potential. I don't know that anybody who's alive today will see it at its full potential. But I think it's moving very quickly, and I think if I come back and visit you, let's say in 10 years, we'll have a very different conversation.
That is really, I would think, the most remarkable thing about this, looking into the future of this, thinking about it in terms of the timing, and realizing that things like you were talking about chemotherapy before, 10 years, 20 years, certainly 30, 40, 50 years from now, we'll look back on something like chemotherapy the way we look back on leaching now, that it'll just be something so primitive.
No, you're right. I mean, there are procedures that I had as a young MS patient that are already viewed as prehistoric, and they don't do anymore. I think that cell therapy is literally going to change the face of medicine, and I have kids from 30 down, and I think they're going to live to see tremendous strides and things that we can't even imagine. I'm not saying that they're going to see it the full potential either, but they're going to see a lot more than I'm going to see, and I think that's pretty exciting.
It also, I suppose, makes it difficult for doctors in some respects because if you're aware of all of this, you have to take the attitude with traditional medicine that if something is the protocol today, it's already old-fashioned. What's new? Because the protocol is already outdated.
Well, there's some truth to that, and it's made true in part because the process of winning FDA approval for drugs and medical devices is extraordinarily long. I mean, one of the common criticisms in medicine of the FDA is that though obviously we want to be protected, we want the public to be protected on questions of drugs and devices, it takes so long and it takes so much money, the resources that go into winning approval. It can take a decade to win approval for a new drug. And believe it or not, from the very beginning to winning approval can cost up to $1 billion. That's $1 billion with a B. And it's too long and it's too expensive.
Do you think that's going to change? Do you sense that from the people that you talk to in this world that's going to change, or is that going to stay the same?
I think it's going to change because I think things are going to develop so quickly that they're going to streamline the process. They have to. It's just insane, especially with a population that's just getting sicker. I mean, we're very quickly becoming the oldest population in the history of the country. Chronic illnesses are tied to age. Almost half the population literally has at least one chronic illness. The need is so strong for new drugs, new therapies, and including cell therapies, that it would be irresponsible, I think, not for the FDA not to streamline the approval process and get these new therapies to people faster.
Of course, the other part of it that will drive that, I suppose, is the fact that this is a global phenomenon at this point. And if it's not going to happen faster here, it'll happen somewhere else.
Yeah, and the approval process in other places is not as rigorous as it is here. I'll tell you, a lot of people go to other countries to get some treatments because they can't get them here.
Is that something you had ever looked at?
No, because if I'm critical of the FDA, I'm skeptical of going to another country, not knowing anything about their standards and not knowing anything about their approval process. That I just don't want to do anything reckless. I'm not in a position to know what's reckless or not reckless.
Do you think that you'll have as much hope for this new round of treatment, for this new procedures?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I've been up and down on hope for so long, and I've had so many problems that it's a little hope can be pretty fragile, and it can be, if it's tough to find hope, it's tougher to hold on to it. So I don't know how to answer it. If I do another round, and if I ever see results, I will be hugely hopeful. I'm sort of idly in neutral right now. I'm not sure of where it's going to take me, and I'm in a wait-and-see mode.
Richard M. Cohen, his book is Chasing Hope, a patient's deep dive into stem cells, faith, and the future. Richard, I thank you so much for spending time with us.
Thank you very much.